This video is part of a series created for WRA 260, Rhetoric, Persuasion, and Culture. In this video, I want to define what rhetoric has meant to others and what it will mean in this course. It's important to discuss definitions of rhetoric because there are at least two out there. One is mere rhetoric, and the other I would call constructive rhetoric. Each meaning is about the opposite of the other. They're really incompatible, so you need to know which definition will be used in this course. The most common meaning of rhetoric nowadays is mere rhetoric. It's probably the meaning that you're most familiar with. Mere rhetoric usually refers to words with little meaning, to words divorced from action and reality. Mere rhetoric can even refer to something akin to lying. In the two Associated Press clippings you see here, notice how people refer to going beyond rhetoric and heated rhetoric. Notice also how presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty promises results rather than rhetoric in a recent campaign ad. Pawlenty claims that he gets results, which are the consequence of action. Results are tangible. We can point to them. Rhetoric seems to be the opposite here. So, mere rhetoric is something akin to using words with little meaning or consequence at best, or just outright lying at worst. Mere rhetoric is words divorced from action. Now, if this were the only definition of rhetoric, then indeed it wouldn't count much for nothing. But although, as Deirdre McCloskey acknowledges, rhetoric can be mere words without action, there is another definition. We can see rhetoric as a more constructive concept. As Deirdre McCloskey has written, rhetoric can mean the study of all the ways of accomplishing things with language. That's why I call the second definition of rhetoric constructive. Because under this definition, rhetoric refers to ways we can use language to work together. Under this definition, rhetoric is actually a kind of action, a way of using language to do things. For some cultures, such as the ancient Greeks, rhetoric was the study of persuasion and argument. The teaching of rhetoric was focused on helping free men to persuade others regarding issues like politics, domestic and military policies, and the worth of certain leaders or concepts. When I say free men, by the way, I mean just that. Women and slaves were excluded in ancient rhetoric. And, in fact, rhetoric has often been about helping those in power rather than about helping everybody. This is an issue that we'll revisit throughout the semester. Let's look at a couple more definitions of a constructive type of rhetoric. In the 20th century, Kenneth Burke suggested something similar to Aristotle's conception of rhetoric. For Burke, rhetoric is about inducing cooperation through the use of symbols. That is, rhetoric can involve understanding how others may be persuaded by things such as images, words, and numbers. Barry Brummett, whose work you'll read very soon, defines rhetoric in a similar way. So there's a long tradition of seeing rhetoric as a constructive way to get others to join us, of convincing them of the worthiness of our causes. But the ancient Greek conception of a constructive rhetoric isn't the only constructive definition out there. Consider what you might call a second version of constructive rhetoric. As Maulana Karenga demonstrates in the quote presented here, an African conception of rhetoric focuses on communal deliberation, on figuring out what is good for the community and for the world. In this sense, rhetoric is not only about winning an argument, it's about figuring out how to work together on large-scale problems. Consider an issue as big as the U.S. economy. What should we do about unemployment and home foreclosures? What should we do about rising government debt? These kinds of questions refer to a huge set of interrelated problems, Problems so complicated and interlocked that no single person could possibly have the one right answer. And so we need a more cooperative, constructive, and systematic version of rhetoric. We need to learn effective ways to explore each other's beliefs and to reason ethically about probabilities, like what to do when it comes to economic, environmental, health, and security problems. That's the definition of rhetoric that we'll work with this semester. And so to review, there are at least two competing types of rhetoric. Those who define rhetoric as mere rhetoric believe that its purpose is only to stall or confuse or mislead. But those who define rhetoric as something more constructive see it as a way to influence others through things like images, words, and numbers. At its best, rhetoric may even offer us ways to cooperate, to deliberate more ethically about important issues so big that not one of us could have the right answer. If you have any questions about these topics, please be sure to contact me. Feel free to stop by my office or email me or talk to me in class.